The honourable member from Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, even Liberal MPs now acknowledge that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and now the chaos. Instead of trying to fix their mess of doubling housing costs or the record number of food bank visits, Liberal MPs are in full panic mode trying to save their own jobs. After 24 Liberal MPs told the Prime Minister yesterday that he's become so toxic that he needs to resign, the Immigration Minister called his own colleagues garbage. It got so bad during the caucus meeting, Liberals were fleeing the meeting to the bathroom to text journalists about how angry that they were. Yet the Prime Minister is completely out of touch and is still forging ahead with his plan to quadruple the carbon tax. But it is now clear, Mr. Speaker, everything in this country is broken because the Liberal Party is broken. But the solution is simple. If they can't get their act together, just call a carbon tax election, because Conservatives on this side are fired up and ready to go.
Let's have a public safety election.
The honourable member from Pickering, Uxbridge.
Speaker, Canadians want to know why the Leader of the Opposition won't get his security clearance. Why doesn't he want to learn about ways that the governments like India work to disrupt our institutions? And it can't be those weak excuses that he will be muzzled, because every other leader in this House has received their clearance and has not been prevented from speaking on the matters at hand, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has a choice. He can get the clearance, he can take the briefings, and he can protect the country. Or will he turn a blind eye to the actions of governments like India and who try to undermine our democracy? Will he stand up for Canadians, or will he stand with governments like India? Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has a choice. Party over country, Canadians want to know.
Absolutely.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, it's clear he's not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, or chaos. The Liberal caucus is revolting, because even in one safe Liberal seats, voters are angry. They're angry that the Prime Minister raised their prices and devalued their paychecks with his inflation. They're angry that their grocery and home heating costs keep going up because of his carbon tax, and they're angry that their cars keep getting stolen, their parks are full of dirty needles, and homeless encampments now line their streets. So will the Prime Minister put an end to the anger, spread some much-needed joy, and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
We know that Canadians have had a tough couple of years as a result of the rising cost of living and global inflation, but Canadian households are right to ask who is actually fighting for them. I can tell you it's not Conservative caucus members who don't want to forgive interest on student loans. It's not the Conservative leader who wants to take away the Canada Child Benefit, and if you don't believe me, look at his voting record. It's not the Conservative caucus members who want to make sure that Canadian women don't have access to free birth control. Mr. Speaker, in the next election, people are going to ask themselves, do they want a Liberal government who cares about them, or a Conservative leader who cares about himself?
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
Has it been a tough couple of years, Mr. Speaker? It's been a tough 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And now taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. It's not just Conservatives saying that, it's Liberal MPs too. You see, they can't do it anymore. They can't convince voters that taxes are going down when in fact they're going up. They can't convince their voters that home prices are becoming more affordable when they keep getting more expensive. And they can't convince their voters that crime is down when it just keeps getting worse. So now they're trying to convince the Prime Minister to resign. But since he won't, will he do the next best thing and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share some facts, if I might. I stand here as the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth, and I wonder if this ministry will even exist if Conservatives were to gain power. Here are the facts. Conservatives will cut services to survivors of gender-based violence. They'll cut critical supports for women entrepreneurs. They'll cut life-saving support for grassroots organizations. They will cut pharmacare and contraceptives for women. We on this side of the House stand for women and gender-diverse people. They do not. Straight facts, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
That is baseless and false. We're going to cut the carbon tax, eliminate it, and defund the CBC and put that savings back in taxpayers' pockets. But consider where we are. It's actually kind of amazing. Liberal MPs are so frustrated that they're not allowed to speak in caucus, they're actually confiding in Conservatives. They have to sneak out to the bathroom to have therapy text sessions with journalists, and cabinet ministers call their own colleagues garbage because they're speaking out against the Prime Minister's terrible record. He's losing control, he's losing confidence, he lost the plot a long time ago, so for the love of all that's holy, will he finally call a carbon tax election?
The honourable minister for...
The opposition, the leader of the Conservatives would do if he was the Prime Minister, he would cut things like the Canada Summer Jobs Program, Mr. Speaker, something that exists in every one of our communities that is so important to employers and so important to kids. Mr. Speaker, do you think that we would be able to maintain our progress on clean water? He would cut funding to First Nations dependent on a real and fair, equitable solution.
Perhaps we'll take just a quick second so that people can reflect on the fact that you must not take the floor if you have not been recognized by the Speaker.
That you should not be speaking unless you're recognized by the Speaker.
The honourable member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, why the Prime Minister was all smiles yesterday when he left his chaotic caucus where 24 MPs called for his departure? It's simple, because the Prime Minister knows he can count on the support of the 32 Bloc Québécois MPs down there to keep him in office. The Bloc supported this Prime Minister despite the fact that he doubled the cost of housing, he inflated the cost of food, he caused a rise in violent crime and created the worst immigration crisis in Canadian history. Will the Prime Minister take a look behind him, hear the message from his backbenchers and Quebecers, and call an election now? The Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listen. The sheer hypocrisy of the Conservative Party is eminently clear. Let us not forget that the leader of the Conservative government at the time removed benefits for diabetics. Since then, they've voted against free pharmacare for people living with diabetes. We see the Conservatives are all about doublespeak. That's all they're about. The honourable member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, the minister should perhaps go round her caucus and notice that 24 of her MPs have come out to demand the Prime Minister's departure just this week. A Prime Minister that's doubled national debt, mortgage prices that has allowed criminality to explode. The Prime Minister's incompetence, Mr. Speaker, has led to an alarm bell being rang in amongst his own partisans who are calling for a change of leadership. He even sent one of his ministers to say that opponents within his party, his own MPs, are garbage. The Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost, nor the insults. When is he going to drop the writ? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us talk about housing and incompetence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr. Speaker. 6 affordable housing units. That's all the Conservative leader was able to do when he was housing minister throughout the country. He can't even find where these 6 are. He's trying to figure out where he can go to find them. Did someone perhaps build something that he could appropriate? No. Only 6 housing units. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member from La Prairie. For years, the Bloc Québécois has been alone in Ottawa in pointing out that the federal government's immigration targets are leading us straight into a wall. For years, the government has been lecturing us, saying that there is no such thing as an intake capacity limit, lecturing us that to talk about reception capacity is to directly criticise immigrants, lecturing us that Quebec doesn't lack the capacity to welcome immigrants, it lacks the will. And then finally today, the federal government has decided to do a 180 and lower its immigration thresholds. Why did they wait until the whole of Canada was in crisis before finally listening to Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have moved today is a reasonable immigration plan by reducing permanent residency targets and temporary residency targets. This is a reasonable and reasoned plan that comes from contributions from people coast to coast to coast that asked us to reduce our volumes. I think that Canadians should be proud. It's not a radical reduction. It's about the same as the plan we proposed in 2020, but I think that's going to serve Canadians in Quebec as well. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, not only has the federal government finally agreed with us on intake capacity, it has also recognised the Bloc Québécois' call for successful immigration. I quote from their report on immigration. For immigration to succeed, housing, education, healthcare, childcare and other essential services must keep pace with projected population growth. Well, gosh, Mr. Speaker, they've figured it out. Quebecers have been telling them for years, but it wasn't until Canadians told them that they would finally listen. Why didn't they listen to Quebecers before instead of lecturing us throughout the years? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. I'd like to thank to the Bloc's contributions to national unity.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, abortion is health care, but under this Liberal government, so many Canadians still don't have access to reproductive health care. And for those who live outside of larger urban centres, it's almost impossible. You know, the anti-choice Conservatives would only make this worse. The Trump-light leader and his extremist cabinet has voted 5 times against to restrict abortions. And while the Prime Minister talks a good game, he hasn't done enough to ensure that Canadians get the care that they deserve. Why hasn't the government taken access to reproductive health care seriously?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for her advocacy, but the right to an abortion and access to it go hand in hand. And through a $45 million sexual and reproductive health fund, we're addressing that. We're making sure, Mr. Speaker, that Canadians facing obstacles accessing reproductive health care are supported financially, and organizations providing those essential services have capacity funding. While Conservatives MPs try to limit a woman's right to choose, we'll continue to work hard at opening every possible door, Mr. Speaker, to increasing access.
The Honourable Member from London Fanshawe.
Canadians have heard that Liberal rhetoric before, but the point here is that abortion care and access to it isn't good enough. Women and gender-diverse Canadians are scared. They know that their rights are under attack, and they've seen far-right movements and politicians in Canada emboldened. The Conservatives continue to side with anti-choice movements and believe that Canada is a, quote, lawless state of fetal killing. But we know abortion is health care. Will this Liberal government use the Canada Health Act to make sure that all Canadians have full access to abortion?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, and I completely agree. Abortion is health care. It's absolutely essential that every woman in every part of this country has access not only to abortion, but to the reproductive tools that she needs to have control and autonomy over her own body. And we are making remarkable progress on that. Signing agreements with every province and every territory, having indicators common on health standards across the country, making sure that for the first time, every woman everywhere has access to the contraceptives that she needs. That's what freedom looks like. That's what we're delivering.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member from Calgary Shepherd.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and now even excuses are up. The Prime Minister now admits he destroyed Canada's immigration system and the 150-year immigration consensus. He can't fix what he broke. He can't fix immigration. He can't fix housing or anything else right now because he's fighting his own caucus. So instead of blaming everyone else, including immigrants like myself, will he just admit that he shattered the immigration system and caused lasting damage to Canada's housing market, healthcare, and jobs?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Monsieur le Président. Look, I was flabbergasted to hear the Leader of the Opposition's answer today, the most immature answer on immigration that I've ever heard. He's late to the game. He's so late to the game on this, he hasn't even come up with a slogan yet. So when he comes up with a slogan, perhaps we'll take the chance to respond. But what we've proposed is a plan for controlled migration. We're proud of it. It serves Canadians well.
The honourable member from Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Speaker. It's rich coming from that particular minister who called 24 Liberal MPs garbage because they're looking after their own careers and worried they're not going to make it. They're not going to be here after the next election because their own constituents are going to send them to the unemployment line. Now, this Prime Minister is reckless, and he even said it himself. He didn't get it right. He said it during his own press conference. He didn't get it right on immigration. He didn't get it right on housing. He can't get it right on the carbon tax. So, will the Prime Minister just admit that his flip-flop has destroyed the immigration system and accept his own personal failure?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and
What
Citizenship.
I said, Mr. Speaker, is that it's garbage to focus on anything other than the circus clown that he's supporting.